While in the South, a whole nother thing was going on. Actual slave patrols going on in the South, right? The first formal slave patrol was created in the Carolina colonies in 1704. Slave patrols had three primary functions. One, to chase down, apprehend, and return to their owners runaway slaves. Two, to provide a form of organized terror to deter slave revolts. And three, to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers who were subject to summary justice outside the law if it violated any plantation rules, right? So after that, well, after the slave patrols were implemented, then you had all these other vigilante groups, the KKK being created. Then you had these laws that helped to enforce this other stuff, like supporting laws that help to support the brutality that the police forces were inflicting upon black people in the United States. Jim Crow laws came much later, but let's talk about the black codes first. I mean the slave codes, excuse me. The slave codes, right? So when the slave codes were created, they had to be enforced. So more police brutality. So the South Carolina Act of 1740 said, whereas the having slaves taught to write or suffering them to be employed in writing may be attended with great inconveniences, be it enacted that all and every person and persons whatsoever who shall hereafter teach or cause any slave or slaves to be taught to write, or shall use or employ any slave as a scribe in any manner of writing whatsoever hereafter taught to write, every such person or person shall for every such offense forfeit the sum of 100 pounds current money. So that was for South Carolina. In Virginia, the slave code of 1819 stated that all meetings or assemblages of slaves or free Negroes or mulattoes mixing and associating with such slaves at any meeting house or houses in the night, or at any school or schools for teaching them or reading or writing, either in the day or night, under whatsoever pretext, shall be deemed and considered an unlawful assembly, and any justice of a county wherein such assembly shall be, either from his own knowledge or the information of others of such unlawful assemblage, may use his warrant directed to any sworn officer or officers authorizing him or them to enter the house or houses where such unlawful assemblages may be the purpose of apprehending or dispersing such slaves, and to inflict corporal punishment on the offender or offenders at the discretion of any justice of the peace, not exceeding 20 lashes. So basically you can see in there, especially in the codes of Virginia, that force, brutal force, physical force can be used to correct action, right? And those who caught them could act as the enforcers of the law, right? The patrollers. And so we also had the Casual Killing Act that was passed on October of 1669, which stated, whereas the only law in force for the punishment or refractory servants resisting their master, mistresses, or overseer cannot be inflicted upon Negroes, nor the obstinacy of many of them by other than violent means suppressed, be it enacted and declared by this grand assembly, if any slave resist his master, or others by his master's order correcting him, and by the extremity of the correction should chance to die, that his death shall not be considered a felony, but the master or that other person appointed by the master to punish him be acquitted from molestation, since it cannot be presumed that malice existed, which alone makes murder a felony, or that anything should induce a man to destroy his own estate. So laws were created to protect not only the slave patrol and the police officers or the coppers or whatever title that they use, not only basically these laws were created to help protect those who killed the slave.
Law. Use this word with caution. The laws do not necessarily produce justice.
Yes, that's it.
Yes, that's a flat statement. That's
Mm-hmm.
either true or false.
Mm-hmm.
Laws, there are a lot of laws, but laws change. But justice remains the same. Now, you can put that slogan into your mind. Laws change,
Mm-hmm.
but justice remains the same. Now, a law is what? Anything that people do is a law. I mean, you know, when you do it, and people do different things. So that doesn't necessarily mean that justice is being produced.
Okay.
Because you have to have, then you go to the definition of justice. A law really is anything that is done. Anything that is done is a law. If you pick up a pencil, that's the law of picking up a pencil. If you're driving a car, that's the law of driving a car, because there are certain laws that govern driving a car. Now, I'm not talking about traffic stops and all like that. I'm talking about just driving the car. That's a law. It's a law. Anything that is done by a squirrel, by a bird, is a law. Why? The bird is doing it. The squirrel is doing it. But justice is balance between people, which means what? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's an absolute. But laws do not necessarily produce justice.
Okay.
Laws, which is that which is done, either will produce justice or they will not. You can have laws that don't produce justice at all. It does just the opposite. It works against justice. That's why, you know, when they had laws that said that, you know, black people sat on the back of the bus, was that justice? Well, people would say that, it's the law. So laws are associated with justice. So if you say that something is a law, you automatically got justice. No, you don't. That's why we had to have a compensatory definition, which is what I came up with one that I think will stand the test of time in the 1990s. I came up with one in the 1980s, balance between people, but that was very thin. That was weak. What do you mean, balance between people? What does that mean? But later on, in the early 1990s, I said I have to put some flesh on those bones of balance between people. So I came up with one that I think will stand the test of time, and if anybody comes up with one better, I will adopt it.
Yes.
Because we need a concise, razor sharp definition for the word justice.
Regardless of what you may have been told, expect at all times to be mistreated as a result of so-called laws and or legal systems that you are involved in and or subject to during the existence of the system of white supremacy. Do not expect truth to be revealed or used in a manner that results in justice and or correctness through so-called lawmaking, and that is directly or indirectly dominated by racist man and or racist woman. At best, expect only the expressions of so-called concern or sympathy. According to compensatory logic, a law is anything that is done, as he stated in the clip. This means that every time any police person does anything, he or she is practicing, enacting, enforcing, etc., a law of whatever it is that is being done. It is important to know and to understand that a law is not the same as justice, as he said. In a known universe dominated by the non-just or incorrect acts of people, it is best and correct not to use the word police to apply to any person now in existence. It is best and correct to use the terms law enforcement officer, or law enforcer or law enforcement officer, law enforcement official, etc. The terms are best and correct because of what a law is. Welcome back Welcome back to the On the Shoulders of Giants YouTube channel. I am Joseph Ward, and I am continuing my review of the compensatory code by Neely Fuller Jr., or the correct title is the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a compensatory counter-racist code, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. And this week I am covering law. Last week, I covered labor. We're going through all 9 areas of human activity. And this week, we're going in law. You see, I started the video with a clip of myself giving a brief overview of the history of the police force in America. And the part of the clip that you got was the history of the Southern slave patrols in America. And I followed that up with Neely Fuller talking about what law is. And that's what we're concentrated on today, what law is. So, justice is that which is done that results in no person being mistreated, plus that which is done that results in the person who needs help the most get the most constructive help. Laws are a combination of things done that may or may not result in the establishment of justice. Like he said, and I repeat, just because a law exists does not mean the end result of that law is justice. The end result of that law could be injustice. And who knows that better than Black people in America, right? So study the laws that are made by people that you are involved with and produce ways of using those same laws in a manner that best promotes the production of justice and correctness between all people. Okay, so he talks about 2 basic goals of correct law enforcement. The first is to produce justice, and the second is to eliminate justice. The explanation: laws change, but justice remains the same. And that's what he was talking about, his definition of justice, or saying that justice needs to be produced. Laws change, which they change all the time, but justice remains the same. And justice should be equal treatment between all people, creatures, and everything that exists. So a law is a tool. A law is a tool that can be used to produce and or maintain justice. A law can be used as a tool to produce and or maintain injustice. And we know that. Any law that is enforced by people in a manner that does not promote the production of justice and or is enforced in such a manner that does not help to produce justice is a non-law, right? Because the end result of law for us should always be justice and correctness. But if law enforces incorrectness and law upholds the system of white supremacy, then that which is considered law needs to be changed, because it is still law, but it is the end goal is oppression and degradation, because these laws are enacted by the system of white supremacy. And we know why they gave their laws: to help them maintain dominance. Remember, everything that they're doing is to maintain the system of white supremacy. They want to maintain dominance. I know people don't like when I say that, but if we don't like that they're dominant, then we have to not let them dominate us. It's just that simple. Any law that is enforced by people in a manner that does not promote the production of justice and or is enforced in such a manner that does not help to produce justice is a non-law, which I read. Any person who enforces a non-law is acting as an outlaw and should not be allowed to enforce any law. Well, we got a bunch of outlaws running around, but we're going to get into the difference between a police officer and a law enforcement officer. So if a system produces injustice, then the rules that maintain the system are incorrect, even though these same rules, if used to maintain a justice system, would be correct rules. White supremacy is an incorrect system that produces injustice. Any person who willfully helps to establish, maintain, expand, or refine a condition of white supremacy, or who does not at all times strive to speak and or act against the condition, is a criminal and or an agent of criminals. All comforts that come to any white person as a direct or indirect result of the practice of white supremacy are all comforts unjustly received, right? So if any of your behavior and any of your activity is helping to support and maintain the system of white supremacy, then you're not on the right side of justice. Then you are an agent of the system of white supremacy, whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether you're black or white. no matter what. If your actions are helping to uphold the system of white supremacy, then you are an agent of the system of white supremacy. I've said it before, and I continue saying it. All white people who practice racism and white supremacy directly or indirectly are equal to each other in that practice. This is true because each individual act of racism is interrelated. Remember, we talked about the unified field theory, is interrelated with all other acts of racism. This means that all white people who practice racism in any form are equally as guilty as those white people who practice racism in all forms.